By way of introduction, I'm Victoria. I am the co-founder and CEO of Pace AI. We are building AI to help augment teachers and learners in English language learning classrooms across all kinds of learning modalities. That could be entirely in person as well as fully asynchronous, or somewhere in the middle in terms of hybrid or in person with a distance learning component across both credit and non-credit ESL courses. And so the theme of today, let me share my presentation screen with you all. The theme of today is in this brave new world of AI, especially generative AI and large language models, we're really thinking about how we can use AI to transform any content. And when we say any content, we mean any text-based content from training manuals. That could be part of an integrated education and training course, or that could be authentic news content for intermediate and advanced learners, to stories or open education resources, any kind of content, and making that into a personalized interactive learning experience for the English as a second or speakers of other languages. So a little bit about us, and to kind of frame this presentation and conversation, is we originally were spun out of the Paul Allen Institute for AI Research up in Seattle. And we started out partnering with different kinds of industrial affiliates programs for upskilling English language learners, really working with adult learners in this context. And today we partner with some of the largest community colleges in California, school districts, especially again targeting adult learners across the country, and also immigrant education programs. We also have global learners in over 95 countries. And our team is really bridging those two worlds of teaching English as a foreign language as certified TEFL educators. And we're also all AI researchers, product leaders, and engineers with experience from Stanford, MIT, and Microsoft Research. So what we are striving to do is to build into this AI-powered platform the best practices of teaching pedagogy in terms of competency-based and formative assessments, and really teaching to the skills necessary to bridge the gap between what's taught in a textbook or a traditional classroom and the skills needed for modern workforce, and other kinds of contexts that adult learners may be learning in. That could be EL civics, that could be career technical education, and the entire gamut. And so some of the content types that our platform currently, we've worked with our partners in providing that bridging that gap for our PDFs and Word documents, different kinds of integrated education and training worksheets, as well as authentic articles, blog posts, stories, and teachers have also gotten very creative. We recently partnered with an educator in building project-based learning and using that on our platform. So what does it mean for us in terms of how to teach English on any topic? So this means that we allow teachers to plug in the kind of content that they want to use. So a lot of the partners we work with have very diverse student populations and also have a lot of diverse content on the learning material side. So these are teachers who might be working across 3 or 4 or more different kinds of sources, whether that's open education resources. Maybe they're working in a career pathway course and they have content from an employer sponsor. Whatever that is, they're able to plug that into our platform directly through uploading that content. And our AI then takes that content and transforms it into an interactive learning experience, complete with personalized lessons tailored to different student levels. Additionally, you can also, as a teacher, browse and discover fresh content from our own content library. So we have a library of over 1,000 pieces of different kinds of leveled content that is sourced from open education resources in the public domain, and other kinds of teacher curated resources. And what that looks like is you can filter on the different difficulty levels of the content, and you can also sort by topical interests. So on the left-hand sidebar here, you can sort and discover content by business or science or technology or whatever kinds of interests your learners might have. Of course, we also have a leveled reader, which is great for a diverse audience of learners that covers low beginning literacy to upper advanced. So what does it mean once you've uploaded this piece of content, whether that's something from your core class content, something you've discovered on our platform, or something else? What does it mean to create this interactive learning experience? So right off the bat, we have a built-in audio reader, which this is an example with an intermediate advanced course where they're learning about science and technology in the news. And this is a news article from CNN. And the audio reader is able to read that out loud to students by using AI to generate this native sounding audio. And this has been a really great tool for our partners who have students with maybe sporadic attendance or who need additional support outside of the classroom. This is a great way for students to get caught up on their own time and also get to replay and repeat the same sentences and words to get that listening practice in. So this is really a tool that's been used. We've seen a lot of great usage in our asynchronous and our hybrid learning models, especially. And then the core kind of main program on our platform is the personalized lessons. So from that piece of content, our AI crafts these exercises that are skills-based. So you'll see vocabulary, you'll see pronunciation in context. So our AI picks out the key words and phrases of the language and then creates this pronunciation exercise. Students will record themselves and they'll get real-time feedback from the AI in terms of what words they said correctly and where they need to brush up or polish or practice some more. Then they'll also be able to hear the example speaker and then also their own recording. And so these are some examples. Here, I'll talk more about the pronunciation in a little bit more detail because this has been a fan favorite among both teachers and students alike. So the goal of these kinds of exercises, we also have, in addition to pronunciation and vocabulary, grammar and conjugation in context, again, of the content that they're reading. And so that would be scaffolded to the different learner levels, whether that's someone at a low beginner level or an upper intermediate advanced level, those will all look different. And so these are some of the kinds of exercises on our platform that are generated by the AI, tailored to the different student levels. And a key call out here is that the idea is no two language learners that are lower intermediate or upper beginner are exactly the same. So the idea is, in addition to tailoring the content and scaffolding the exercises side to meet the levels, the Lexile levels and level appropriacy needs of those learners, our AI is also personalizing that to the individual pain points. So what we're trying to do here is to target the differences in skills-based competencies. So some students are really good at reading and understanding and grammar, but might struggle with oral production and pronunciation. And another student who's at the same level might be the exact opposite, where they're really good at verbal output, but they struggle with grammar tenses and so on. And so the idea here is for AI to create this end-to-end exercise, an end-to-end lesson that builds on and reinforces these different kinds of skills-based language competencies. So I mentioned I wanted to drill in a little bit more to pronunciation, and here's another example of that exercise in context where the student will record themselves and the AI will give that real-time feedback. So I want to share a little bit about kind of how this works. So this is based on a neural acoustic model, which is a kind of AI that is trained on hundreds of different kinds of accented speech patterns for English language. And it is predicting comprehensibility and understandability of the learner. So instead of looking at a student and saying, okay, you need to correct your accent and trying to reduce their accent, this is doing the opposite. This is looking at whether the student is able to be understood in the context of what they're trying to say. So in the context, and this could be, for example, in a career training course, this would be the word in the context of that workplace situation. And so what's really key for us here is this is a huge way in which AI can actually help improve equity and level the playing field. And it really helps students gain a lot more confidence because AI it's judgment free. And B, this means that students can see, even if I have an accent, I can embrace my accent and I can still be understood. And so this has been a huge confidence booster when we work with our partners on this. And of course, this also saves teachers a lot of time in terms of grading. So, traditionally, teachers will have to give an exercise that's based on a pronunciation, maybe a phrase, maybe a sentence, and they'll then have to, download those audio files of each student, listen to them, play them back, and then give feedback to each student. And so this is a huge burden on teachers, and also it also means that students are limited in the amount and quality of the practice that they can get on a daily basis. On the other hand, with AI, building this feature into this end-to-end lesson, this end-to-end exercise gives students that real-time feedback so that they can improve at their own pace, pun intended, and also at a level that's appropriate for them. So the next key feature I want to show you in how AI is personalizing this experience is the private AI tutor. And what this does is it equips each student with their own personal AI tutor who gives them support outside of class hours. And what this means is that the AI tutor is tailoring its responses to each student's level. And it's also, as you see here, able to communicate in the student's native language as needed. Of course, in many classroom contexts, you might want to encourage a monolingual learning context. And in that case, you certainly can, especially with intermediate advanced learners, that can be highly beneficial. And you don't have to advertise that that is a possibility. But for the lower level learners, having that additional kind of crutch or scaffold in their native language can be really beneficial. And so this is how that tutor can plug into the context of the content the student is learning from to support with explanations. So students can ask the tutor about grammar, about corrections in their writing, about clarifications on vocabulary they're learning. For example, this might be a nursing assistant or a technician course, and they have technical jargon that they're not sure about and want an additional explanation outside of the word lookups presented in the dictionary that we also support. Now they can ask the AI tutor to explain what a certain concept means, and the AI tutor is tailored to their level and will respond at a Lexile level that's appropriate for them. By a show of hands, I'm curious for those of you in the audience right now, how many of you are using some kind of large language model, whether that's ChatGPT, Bard, or something else in your own lesson planning? You can raise your hand or you can type that in the chat. I'm curious how many of you are. Wonderful, amazing. Using ChatGPT, great. Also ChatGPT, okay, a lot of ChatGPT love, great. Now, for those of you who are using ChatGPT to create your lesson plans, how many of you would trust ChatGPT directly with your English language learner students? Eva says, I would love to learn how to. Wonderful. To learn to save time, definitely resonates. Anyone else? I like the idea of a personalized tutor. Yes, definitely. Definitely all very relevant. So what we've learned in our own teaching experiences and speaking with dozens of educators, especially in teaching adult learners, is that ChatGPT and these LLMs can be really helpful in crafting those lesson plans for you as a teacher. But then there's this gap in how you translate that lesson plan into something that the end learner can actually use. So closed captioning, okay. So for example, you might have crafted this lesson plan and you might ask ChatGPT to even level it, but you still have to go create the exercises yourself. Or you have to create, for example, you want to do a pronunciation exercise, you still have to grade that. You still have to create that end-to-end experience for the student. And so what we're trying to do here is and I know I have some questions in the chat. I'll open it up for questions at the end. So if you can hold on to those for a moment. What we are doing here is this is built on top of GPT and LLMs and other kinds of AI like that. And it's meant to bridge that gap. So on the AI tutor side, it means that it is doing the kind of fine-tuning and prompt engineering to meet the student where they are at their Lexile level. And also the AI tutor on the back end is actually creating those end-to-end exercises. So it's really meant to go from you have this lesson plan and you have this tailored version of it, maybe courtesy of an LLM. How do you go from there to actually having this be something that you can use in the classroom with your individual students or as an assignment that they go home with? So finally, I want to talk a little bit about classroom integration and what the support looks like there, as well as some of the kind of learning outcomes that we've observed so far. So in terms of classroom integration, we support Google single sign-on. So this means that there's really seamless onboarding for students in classrooms where you're already using something like Google Workspace, Google Classroom, and you already have Gmail set up. We also support link embedding into all of the major LMSs. So if you're using Canvas, if you're using Schoology, Blackboard, etc., you can embed our link into an assignment that you're creating. And then when you click on that link as a student, if they have an account, they'll be prompted to log in. Otherwise, the sign up will show up for them there. They'll be able to enter your institution code and they'll be linked directly into your class. And so this makes a lot of that onboarding really seamless. I see a quick question in the chat that I want to address. We do not have an LTI right now, but the link itself can be embedded. So if you have a Canvas page, you can paste our link inside of that. Great question. And then in terms of the onboarding and manual onboarding support, as you'll see in this video, it's really meant to be lightweight for teachers to get onboarded. It's one click to create that class, one click to invite students. However, we create multiple different ways and methods for students to get added to the class, in large part to support students who have diverse digital literacy needs. So you can actually manually create your student's account for them. so that they can log in. So this is a way that you can support students who, might not have as much digital fluency around apps and technology. I'm sure we'll have a lot more questions on integration as well, so we'll save some time at the end for more of those questions. I want to talk a little bit about learning outcomes here. So for us, we've seen our program really kind of shine in a few different ways. One is the in-context learning. So because all of the exercises, as you'll see, are generated based on and from the underlying content. So that's open-ended. That could be anything that you're bringing to the table. It could be any open education resources, any training manuals, any integrated education resources like that. Because of that, we've seen a lot more enhanced vocabulary and increased retention of what's being learned by students using this in-context learning model. We've also found two things that I'm really, really proud of in terms of our platform is that students have a lot more confidence in communicating thanks to the pronunciation training because of the frequency of the feedback and the quality of the feedback, and also that pronunciation is happening in context that matters for the learner. And then finally, in terms of the support and learner engagement, as well as the strength in digital literacy, we found that students have self-reported, as well as in one case of an educator who knew the digital literacy profiles of her students, had reported that more than 2/3 of them felt an increased confidence around navigating new technologies, even outside of our platform. And so that idea of building that confidence in adult learners, both in communication and in digital literacy, is something that we're really excited to be able to share. And this view here is actually a view of the teacher dashboard, where teachers will be able to see for their class all of the responses of this particular student, their scores, the words and language that they're learning, and the level of that language, as well as their exercises. So all of this is piped back to the teacher dashboard panel on our platform. And you'll also be able to view this by student as well as by assignment. And not pictured here, you will also be able to see the time on task by assignment, as well as the time spent on the platform for each of the students. So some of the takeaways from this session is we wanted to showcase how you can use our AI to not only teach English on any topic, but also have that tailored for learners of any level. And the core kind of pillars of what our platform does is we empower teachers, we give them agency to decide what you want to teach. You can choose your teaching materials. The learning materials for your class can be an amalgamation of your personal collection, authentic materials, IET course materials, or anything else. You can also browse our library. And once you build up that set or sequence of learning materials, you can upload each as an assignment. And then our AI will create these personalized lessons in one click. And these are skills-based practice exercises in each of these lessons that are tailored to different student levels from that same piece of content, as well as to the different and unique pain points of each individual student. And of course, as the student is learning, the beauty is the AI is learning their level and adapting accordingly. And finally, students reap the benefits, both in terms of feeling more supported outside of the classroom and inside if they're in a multi-level class, and they get to improve with real-time feedback. And so this means that diverse students who might not be following in the flow of the class, or who might miss some classes and have sporadic attendance, or learners who enroll late in an open enrollment model, all of these diverse learners are able to get caught up, get personalized real-time feedback at their own pace, and able to feel more supported and more deeply engaged in the course. So that is the end of the materials that I wanted to showcase in this session with you all. But I really wanted to, intentionally, this is meant to be a little bit of a shorter presentation because I really wanted to use this breakout session to understand your learners' needs and the pain points that you're facing in your schools, and to hear from you all in terms of what's keeping you up at night as educators who are interested and already innovating with artificial intelligence. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And I know there's some questions actually. So I think there's still some questions. So I'd love to go through there. If you have any questions, please either raise your hand, or if you can type it in the chat, we'll parallel process this that way. Ruth says, well, faculty are a barrier to this as of now. Ruth, would you like to share a little bit more?
Yeah, I'll unmute because I figure there's 10 of us and we can have a conversation. And I believe that you were on a recent webinar where I was chatting a lot about sort of the user experience aspect of this. I was glad to see you here today. So I think that the technology integration is for all of us. That's the next level of technology integration, right, is going to be the big struggle. And you know, having this array of tools is really going to have to be paired with kind of a train the trainer's model. And I guess you know, where to use with organizations and institutions that you've worked with, how have you seen sort of this array of tools now with kind of this deer in headlights for some, I would say probably for the majority of the faculty on my campus. And I'm at Bridgewater State University, Southeastern Massachusetts, and we are the largest state public institution.
Got it. Thank you for the context and great question. And I'd also love to hear from others who might have experienced kind of similar issues or run into that as what Ruth has expressed. For us, I think with working with our institutional partners, certainly teacher training and teacher time spent getting onboarded can be a very significant barrier because there are just so many tools out there. How do you know what to use, what plugs into what? And so for us, our platform it's teacher mediated, but it's really meant to, at the end of the day, be a student-centered learning experience. So all of the teacher tools side is meant to be very, very lightweight. So teachers are able to do all the classroom management in one click, and then we manage everything on our back end. And so for us, in terms of thinking about plugging into that ecosystem, the idea is to build that ecosystem for AI, for ESL, so that teachers can have all their tools and all their content in one place, and it's all student-centered. So all of the little videos I've showed you in here, there's a student account, student side parallel, so that the student at the end of the day doesn't have to worry about, you know, what's going into prompt engineering, how does fine-tuning work. The student doesn't need to do that or have that cognitive load. The student is just focused on the language learning competency part. Ruth, I guess I'm curious to hear more from you on, you know, in terms of faculty training or onboarding, what are the kinds of challenges that you've seen? Or anyone else who has, would like to weigh in, anyone? Ruth, I see you're unmuted. Would you like to chime in there?
Yeah, I saw someone else just posted something, and so I didn't want to. Okay, so you asked again. I'm sorry. Post it again. Post the question again.
Yeah, so I'm curious kind of for you, what you've seen with faculty in terms of, training or onboarding, what's been the most significant barrier? Or is yeah.
So the AI is so new for our campus that we've had virtually nothing. I mean, we've had our technology education tech group really kind of lead the conversation, but those with some faculty involvement, but those types of workshops aren't all that well attended. We're a unionized environment, so faculty will show up for what they want to show up for and apply to. And at this point, kernels of money barely even motivate our faculty to come forward, and our faculty are still really exhausted from the pandemic. Full disclosure, I am the director of assessment, and I've been at Bridgewater for 10 years. So the question of what motivates the faculty is certainly a tool that will, like yours, that will really be able to help students surmount a language barrier and be successful. It takes a cognitive burden, especially off the student. I think the question becomes still, how do we entice the faculty to take it into their load, where we've got a 4-4, we have a 4-4 load, and community colleges have 5-5s. So maybe it's where we target the tool and bring the tool on board and meet the students where they're at, and then slowly, little by little, it becomes the nature of what we do, and then the faculty naturally come into it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I think it's something that really resonates with us too, in terms of when we roll out to a district or to a program-wide adoption, in terms of getting, I think it's really important for faculty to also feel the buy-in, in terms of not just the burden it takes off of them, but also the value it brings to their students. And I think a lot of faculty that we've worked with, that really gets them bought into, is just seeing, wow, this really does improve outcomes for my learners, and it makes them feel really supported. And then on top of that, I think there's definitely at first inertia, because everyone is stretched so thin in terms of, being able to come in and do teacher trainings. The good thing is, this is, unlike other tools that might have hours of teacher training, everything you need in this is something that can be covered in, less than a 30-minute session. And so the point here is, teachers can plug in very quickly, and the AI is actually, it's really end to end. It's not just something that you would interact with in a prompt engineering way, but it's really end to end, from the lesson and the exercise creation to the grading and the feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. And I saw in the chat, I'm sorry, I'm going to pronounce your name wrong. Sanghyun? I see you wrote, you have a similar question: with the abundance of AI-based applications available, making a discerning choice is challenging. What sets your app apart from the myriad of other AI-based tutoring apps, excluding its focus on ESL? Sanghyun, are you an ESL teacher, or I would love to understand a little bit of context? You are not. Okay. So I will say, it's hard to exclude the focus on ESL, because I think that's really where our AI shines, is creating this personalization for the English language learner. And the reason that this is so necessary is that traditional mainstream large language models are not made for the English language learner. They're trained on Wikipedia, they're trained on New York Times articles, they're trained on public fora for native speakers by native speakers. And so language learners and the data that they need and the kinds of practice and exercises they need are not represented well. And so a lot of what we're doing is trying to make that accessible end to end for the language learner. And one thing, though, just off the bat, that makes this a little bit different is our context relevant teaching and learning scope, in terms of allowing you to plug in any content. So any kind of text-based content, from training manuals to open ed resources, and being able to have our AI work with that content. So that is something that we've seen be different in terms of just a chatbot or just an AI-based conversation partner. What's different for us is creating those end-to-end lessons and grading those as well. Sunghyun, I'm not sure if that answered your question. If you can, when you get a moment, to type some more context of how you're looking at AI and how you're hoping to use AI to transform your lessons or your content, would love to follow up on that. And then Eva, you said, coming from a very new instructor, anything that will save instructor time and still offer support to the learners is so valuable. Amen to that. Definitely, that's something we've seen a recurring theme of in terms of, we've also worked with some of our partners with very, very new instructors as well, who they might not be new to teaching, or they may be, or they just might be new to teaching ESL to adult learners. And having additional teacher tools that are AI powered really augments and extends the teacher. And that's really the goal of what we're hoping to do. And then, Eva, you also wrote, much like ESL, we are competency-based. Are there more evaluations that AI offers besides verbal? Eva, I'd love to understand a little bit more context of the classroom type that you're looking to use something like this in. I'm also going to stop sharing so we can all feel a little bit more in the round, if you will.
Hi, so this is Eva. So we do a lot of, of course, theory and lecture based and all that fun stuff, but we watch our students perform certain tasks, and then we give them real-time feedback. Well, when you have 34 students, it's very time consuming depending on how long the competency is. And so we end up having to do a lot of our own free time to make sure that each student is accomplishing the objectives. Is there an AI tool that, that could help offer some type of assessment where it would, I think that would be a lot of programming, so I'm not really sure how it would work, but something that would assess the practical portion of learning.
Really great question. So right now, what our AI does is craft those end-to-end lessons that are really formative exercise driven. So formative assessments, skills-based exercises. So to your point, this will cover the verbal portion of speaking and pronunciation, really with a focus on pronunciation and comprehensibility. It also covers the vocabulary in context, acquisition of vocabulary in context, as well as grammar and writing. And we also have, I'm not sure if I showed you in there, but we have a listening and transcription exercise as well. And we're actually right now developing a kind of open-ended exercise type, which is based on the context of what you're learning. Maybe this is in the context of a story you're reading in class, or in the context of a training situation, that kind of workplace setup. We're using our AI to create this open-ended question that's either a role play based on the context, or an open-ended speaking and writing exercise where the AI would grade them on both pronunciation, if this is verbally spoken, or it would correct them on also the grammar, the spelling, that the kind of the reasoning and the logic of what they're writing. And so something like that is coming very imminently to the platform, but it's something that we're developing. Eva, I'd love to understand kind of the use cases. Okay, you wrote role play sounds amazing, reasoning and logic, that is something I would want to learn about when it comes out. Yeah, and so would love to learn about when it comes out. Yes. So yes, and again, the kind of reasoning and logic would be in the context of English language learning, just to be clear there. So this would be, for example, you might have an adult learning classroom for civic engagement and community participation, and you might have a unit on how to read and understand bills that they have to pay, or how to schedule a doctor's appointment with their pediatrician for their kids. And some kind of context, you might bring content that is, publicly available content or your own worksheets or kind of sample examples of the kinds of content they might see in the real world. And then I see your comment, that will work for medical terminology and assessment. Exactly. So in the context of upskilling, career training, integrated education and training, all of those kinds of contexts, you can bring that content to the platform. And then our AI will build both those end-to-end lessons that I've shown you, but also working with them on this open-ended kind of interactive, whether that's role play or verbal or written output, and then correcting that in terms of the reasoning of, okay, did that make sense in the context of what you're trying to achieve? You're trying to schedule a doctor's appointment. Did what you said to your doctor in this role play, did that make sense? And so helping with that contextual learning there. Sunghyun asked, is there any level testing available for learners to assess their progress? That is a great question. So as kind of a bit of our own pedagogical leanings is we've always, I've worked with a lot of adult learners who can score really, really well on tests, but that doesn't always translate to communication in the real world in terms of they score really well on the TOEFL or the IELTS or something like that because they've really cracked the code of the structure of the test. And so what we do is instead of explicitly surfacing a test and asking them to, say these things, write these things, conjugate these verbs, what we do instead is we build that into how our AI is trying to assess their level holistically. That said, when the student is onboarded, they do get to either self-report their level, or if they don't know their level, and really that's meant to be used in a teacher-mediated fashion where the teacher might know, okay, this is an upper beginner learner, they should indicate that. That's a way to kind of warm start the algorithm, if you will. But if they don't know their level, we do provide a preliminary level check that assesses them on just the baseline language. Where are they at? And we use that as a starting point for our AI to understand this is the level of this learner. And as they do exercises, where do they struggle? Where are their strengths and weaknesses? And that adaptive learning pattern happens. Wonderful. Great questions, everyone. Any other questions or anyone does this kind of stir any other kinds of thoughts? Does this resonate? Any of the questions resonate? Would love to hear from anyone else. Sunghyun, I see your question. I grasp your teaching methodology. What if learners continue to face the same issue repeatedly? Great question. Sunghyun, can you give me kind of a little bit of context of the learning context, or I can kind of speak to that question from the ESL perspective and what we do when, say, a student just really struggles with a particular sound in a particular word and can't pronounce that correctly, what that looks like. I saw the same questions from the same learner repeatedly. Got it. So we're talking about, for example, a learner who continually has the same question, is struggling with that same kind of pain point. So one thing that we try to triangulate is kind of, for example, if this is a certain sound for a certain type of word, then what we do is we try to set this review schedule in terms of a spaced repetition algorithm so that you're surfacing this in a way that isn't too repetitive. It's not kind of beating a dead horse for the student, and it still feels fresh and relevant, but they'll always get that surface back to them again if they keep missing it. It'll just be surfaced at a cadence that doesn't really frustrate or exhaust them. But the idea here is, one is, if you're missing this word all the time in this context, can we find other contexts to show you that same word? And do you do better in those other contexts? And does that help us triangulate what is it that you're fundamentally missing about this word or this language or this grammar pattern? Eva, I see you have another question. What's the student feedback in concept? Okay, what's the student feedback? Is this in terms of, Eva, would you like to unmute and ask your question? Do they feel supported? Yes.
Oh,
So,
yeah, sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just thinking, are they reporting that they feel supported, or are they progressing faster with this tool?
Yeah, so what we're seeing right now is that learners feel more supported and feel like they can engage better. And so a little bit of context on that is a lot of at least some of the partners we work with, the context is multi-level classes. And so that means that within the same class, you have learners of all kinds of levels. So that same class, you may have someone who's an upper beginner and someone who's a upper intermediate or low advanced learner. And so the problem in these kinds of traditional settings is that that the same content doesn't work for all these different levels. So someone who is way more advanced is going to feel bored by the content and not feel as engaged. And so a lot of the work that we're doing is showing that learners who are at these different levels can still plug in and feel engaged and supported at a level that's appropriate for them. Of course, on the other end of that spectrum is a learner who's below the level of the content being taught. And what our AI is doing is building these lessons in a way that's tailored to their level. So it's kind of catering that level to them so that they can feel like, okay, I'm supported. This isn't this breakneck pace at a level that's way too high. Eva, does that answer your question? Or I'd love to understand if there's other nuances that you'd like to discuss. Wonderful. Wonderful. And Sanghyun, yes. So based on the concept that practice makes perfect, that is in part definitely true, right? Especially with language learning. So for anyone who has studied another language, you'll know that the more you practice, sometimes it just takes a lot of repetition to have it click. And a lot of that is what's underlying this concept of the formative assessments exercises. That said, I think what we also believe in is timely practice and surfacing that practice just in time. So when you look at algorithms based on spaced repetition, the key unlock there is that it's about repeating something or practicing at an interval that makes the most sense for optimizing long-term retention. So if in a traditional and kind of an old school model, maybe you have a deck of flashcards and you don't want to just review all 200 flashcards you have every single day because A, that's boring, and B, it means you get really good at the words you know and the concepts that you know, but you don't spend enough time drilling the ones you don't. And so a lot of what we can do with adaptive learning is surface that just in time so that we can use AI to infer not only your level, but your different pain points with language, and then surface and triangulate different kinds of exercises so that practice always feels fresh. It doesn't feel like I'm looking at exercise 37, like 52 times. It feels like something new and fresh every time, but it's getting at the fundamental pain point that I have, which is with, simple, like present simple tense, or certain vocabulary at the A2 level that includes the TH sound, whatever it could be. It's very honed in on that particular pain point while still being really fresh and interesting to engage with. I know we have just about 6 minutes. I'd love to just open up the floor to anyone who has any thoughts. It doesn't have to be a question, it can just be a comment on either Pace AI or what you're doing in your classroom, bridging AI, especially for ESL, but if you have other use cases, would love to hear from all of you. I think, Johnny, were you the one that earlier on said you're using ChatGPT in your classes?
Yes, that was me.
Would you like to share a little bit with everyone how you're using it?
Well, I mainly use ChatGPT to help me with coming up with, assessment questions or ID. I teach math,
Okay.
and mainly online lately, developmental math and the intermediate algebra. So I've been using ChatGPT more for me. So
Yeah.
I almost think of it as like my own personal thought partner or my own personal assistant. So I
Definitely.
think it's a girl. I name her. It's a girl. Like it's my buddy. But she helps me think of different ideas and how to reply to students. Sometimes I struggle with wanting to communicate in a way that's very clear but direct, but supportive. So it kind of helps me more. So I haven't used it in a way that students can use directly. Now I have looked at the idea of making a chat bot that a student could use, but I haven't quite figured out how to make it do what I wanted to do yet. So that's why this was interesting. Well, it is interesting to me to see how the student can use AI.
Totally get it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know if you've taken a look at the GPTs that folks have been building. I don't know if there's one I'm sure there's one for math as well that might be student friendly, but maybe that's another wealth of exploratory resources.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so I know for us, we're definitely, we're really focused on AI for English as a second language learners, English for speakers of other languages. For those of you who are, I guess by a show of hands or in the chat, how many of you are working with English language learners? Eva, awesome. Okay, got it. Johnny as well, that makes sense. Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. I know we have just a couple minutes left. I will leave my contact in the chat if any of you wants to reach out. We can also jam on other kinds of use cases that are tailor-made for your classroom, or just if you want to talk about AI in personalizing education. It's what we love and it's our passion. So please definitely reach out and say hi. Come say hi. I will also drop our website as well. Wonderful. Okay, thank you, everyone. I'll hang out for the next couple minutes, but feel free to drop off if you don't have any other questions or anything. Thank you all so much for attending this session.